Howdy everyone, it's Saturday, June 6th, D-Day, and I haven't been recording too much stuff here on the farm because what's been going on has been fairly minor kind of stuff, and also I've been working on a job for customers this week, so I haven't been around as much. But I'm out here tonight, I'm mulching the garden beds, finishing that up, and wanted to take a look here with you all at our big 18-acre cornfield. You may remember from earlier videos that the cereal rye cover crop in here was quite tall. I mean, it's probably 18 inches tall, somewhere in there, 16 to 18 inches tall when we terminated it. We had waited a while to do that, and then Dad went in and gave it his best shot for burning that down. And in one of those videos, I kind of commented and said, I hope this all goes well, I hope that it terminates properly, and that the corn ends up fairly clean afterwards. Well, today he just made another pass with some a second pass of 2,4-D. We did learn a lesson from that, and I'll give that to you right now as far as those of you who are interested in employing cover crops or maybe planting green into cereal rye and how you would manage that with an herbicide program. The lesson we learned is that it was nice to let that rye grow, but we probably should have terminated it at planting for the corn. Either the day of, the day after, somewhere immediately thereafter. I think I've said that before, but just to reiterate, that would have been the smart thing to do. Letting it grow is not a big deal, I don't think, because the corn looks nice and healthy, and I'll show you in a minute. However, that said, since we terminated it late while it was a fairly large stand of cereal rye, it would have been smarter to leave out the first pass of 2,4-D. We should have focused our first pass on just terminating that cover crop, and then worried about weed control after the cover had laid down, burned off, and we could have assessed the broadleaf weed situation a little better. I wouldn't call this a big mistake. I think that having to make a second pass with a second round of 2,4-D was not the end of the world. It's just one of those, if I had it to do over again, we probably should have done it the way I just described, which is one pass for the cover crop, wait, assess, then another pass for whatever's left. All that said, let's take a look at the field. This is a pretty nice looking field of corn. There's a nice residue cover. It's not super thick. It's I'd like to see more residue, I guess, if I had my choice, but since we never get everything exactly like we want, I'm gonna go ahead and say that this is pretty good. I'll stop for a second here, stop shaking and just kind of look. Those corn rows are nice and well defined. It's at about V4, coming up on V5 here. And the field looks nice. It's consistent. The high spots where we don't have as much organic matter, the corn's a little shorter. It is a little bit taller and better developed in the low areas. That's just kind of normal for this field. There's more organic matter down there, probably a little bit of nutrient transfer. It's concentrated at the bottom of these little swells and rises, but I can't complain. This really looks good. So next step for us is next week. This is Saturday today, so this coming week we are going to side dress with our second round of fertilizer. I think it's a good time to get that on, just based on where we're at in the schedule. And then we are going to interseed cover crops. So cool deal, right? We terminated this cover crop. You can see it's laid down, got a nice residue mat. We're gonna come in with another cover crop. So the goal is to always have a variety of species growing. We've killed the weeds, hopefully. So hopefully that second round of 2,4-D knocked out any broadleaf, because this field was just tragically full of ragweed, really bad. There will be no more spraying on this field. Corn's gonna be at a height where we can't spray 2,4-D again, and we don't wanna put down anything that'll affect our that has a residual effect and will affect our cover crop that we're going to interseed. So we just ordered our cover crop seed today. It should be in a few days, and yeah, side dress, interseeding, and after that we just watch it grow. And hey, what the heck, as long as we're next to this other cornfield, we only have two cornfields, the big 18-acre field and then this one, which is right around 8 acres and is up against our county road over the hill over there. And this is looking good too. A couple of spots where there's a little bit of some weirdness. I see corn's a little thin in a couple areas. Just kind of noticed with no-till that happens here and there. I don't know if it's a depth or probably seed slot closing problem. A little bit of a late emergence on that stuff. That's kind of typical. This field's got a lot of clay in it, so a lot of variability in the soil composition. No, I'm not worried about it. This looks pretty darn good. So I don't really have anything more to say about this one that I didn't already say about the big 18-acre field. It's just nice to look at it, check up on it, and note that it's looking pretty good. We just took delivery down there in our fertilizer gravity box of our second round of dry fertilizer, and we are gonna side dress our corn. And this morning we went, and in the back of Dad's truck we have all of our cover crop seed for interseeding between the corn rows. So the order of operations is going to be to side dress fertilizer and then interseed the cover crops, and then at that point we are basically done with the corn crop until harvest time. Now, I said we were going to side dress our corn a while back in some other videos, and I said, well, we don't really have the equipment to do that. This will be our first time ever side dressing. And now I'm going to tell you how we're going to do it. So because we're small scale and we don't have a special rig for side dress, I am going to take the row units off of the corn planter, and we're going to use the planter as a fertilizer delivery system. We're going to take the fertilizer coulters and switch them so that they'll run on the other side of the corn rows. We kept track of exactly how we planted the fields, and we are just going to make an identical pass over the fields, exactly the same order as we went in planting, but with the fertilizer being delivered to the other side of the corn rows. And I'm going to tighten up those fertilizer openers as tight as they'll go so that they get in the ground, and we're going to hope that that works. So it's a poor man's method of getting side dress done. The reason we're side dressing in this way, and the reason I'm going to all this trouble to get it done this way, is last year we applied some starter with the planter, and then we had broadcast the rest of the fertilizer before we planted. So we broadcast a certain amount and put a certain amount banded with the planter. We didn't get very good results with that with no-till. I like the idea of getting the granular fertilizer. We're not set up for liquid, and we can't use anhydrous. We could, but we're not set up for either of those things. So granular is what we have to work with. So this year I wanted to get all the fertilizer on and somehow get it in the ground. This is the only way we know we can do it. So we're going to prep the planter and get this second round of fertilizer on. And we've reduced our rates somewhat in order to help encourage the biology, because too much fertilizer will burn up the soil biology. But also by putting it in bands, with the first band being on one side of the corn rows and now the second passel banded on the other side, we leave a little bit of room in the soil profile for the biology in there to not be overwhelmed with fertilizer. So this is going to be a real experiment, and congrats, you're coming along for the ride. Well, we're a little over halfway done here. We got 2 of the row units off, and we just basically took the chains loose and took the 4 bolts out holding the arm assembly to the frame, and that's about all there is to it. So all right folks, here it is, fertilizer buggy converted. We're about to head out and see if this actually works. I think it will. Here we are, side dressing corn with a corn planter with no planter units. Another adventure here at Ravenview Farm. Alright, so I took a little pause here. I just refilled with fertilizer. And now that I've got the outside rounds done, I'm going to start going back and forth. Just kind of show you the job this is doing. Probably certainly not as good as a dedicated side dress rig. But, you know, see, like there's some granules not covered up. We'll just tamp those down. That'll get me a 1/4 of a bushel. Anyway, probably not doing quite as good a job as a dedicated side dress rig, but it is getting the dry fertilizer next to the corn. With the no-till, I just really don't like broadcasting that urea and letting it sit on the surface and hoping for a rain, even with a stabilizer. So this is our improvised way of doing it without having to buy any equipment. So now, it's pretty difficult for me to hold a camera, watch the rows, not dig out any corn or knife it over. So I don't know how much more video I'm going to be able to take, but I'll see what I can do. And for anyone wondering, there's my little guide right there, little chain hanging down. You can see that. We just put that over the corn row and everything centers up the way it's supposed to. So it's kind of a brain dead operation to put this stuff on, but it's a nice day, and I'm out here on a tractor, so I really can't complain. Well, I've got to say, I really enjoy this process. I had supper, the wind's died down, it's a beautiful evening. This fertilizer is going on real good. It's quiet, you know, with the row units off the planter. The row units are real squeaky and squealy sometimes with the mud scrapers and the seed tube guards and stuff. But this is real quiet. As far as the experience goes, 8 out of 10. Wood side dress again. All right, we're here at the end of the day. I finished that 8-acre field out by the county road, so that's done now. I hit our 8 rows of sweet corn by the driveway, so they've got a little something, a little extra juice. And got the rig here, needs to be refilled for tomorrow morning. And then the big 18-acre field needs to be done tomorrow. So I'll start on that in the morning and hopefully just blast right through until it's done. I want to take a minute here. I mean, you've seen the process now from some different angles and doing it a little bit. There's another thing I'm out to prove with this. And it's getting back to kind of the point of this channel, which was to show our sort of journey through the regenerative agriculture practices, the no-till cover crops as much as possible, trying to get that into our normal method of farming. And one of the things I wanted to prove, a lot of times I see, sometimes on YouTube channels, sometimes just talking to other farmers, and, you know, especially bigger farmers who have a lot of money invested in specific equipment for specific jobs. And they'll talk about regenerative agriculture and say, you know, cover crops, no-till, we'd love to try it. It won't work in our area. We don't have the right equipment. We don't have the right soil. A lot of reasons come up for not doing it. I just want to prove anyone can do this. You can do it with the equipment you have. You don't need special equipment to do no-till and cover crops. I've probably got, I don't know, maybe a grand total of $500 into this planter to convert it with the spiked closing wheels, when the row units are on, of course. With the spiked closing wheels, that was about $400 to outfit those, and that was the most expensive thing we've done on it so far. We found the fertilizer coulters, which were just sort of replacements for the stock ones, for a very reasonable price. The down pressure springs, I think we paid $35 a pair for them. It did not take much to get this thing set up to do this. And like when we interseed into the corn, you know, you don't need a special interseeder. We had a grain drill that happened to fit between the corn rows, and that's the next thing we're going to do after this, so that'll be in a future video. But like, all we do is take some row units off of the John Deere 8300 grain drill, and it will plant cover crops interseeded into corn. It takes a little creativity, a little ingenuity, and of course anything you can do for free is the way to do it if you're small scale, even if you're big scale though. I mean, if you're a large scale farmer and you can modify a piece of equipment and it doesn't cost you anything, or it costs you very little, you're ready to go, you know. And guys who think they need to hop up their planters with a whole bunch of stuff like row cleaners, and yeah, you can. It's fine if you do. You have the option to use them then if you think it's necessary. I haven't needed them. I can plant green. Planted into every single acre of this farm now, over 2 years through this rotation. We've been able to use this planter to put all our corn in over every acre of the farm, except for where that alfalfa field is, and that'll be next year. We'll plant corn into that. So being able to plant green, just knowing kind of a strategy, knowing that if we don't have the residue on the ground beforehand, then you don't need the trash whippers. So planting green is ideal for a setup like this. Then you knock the residue down later when you terminate it, you know. So just thinking things through, coming up with a strategy, You know, anyone could go out and buy an old 8300 grain drill and experiment with putting some cover crops down. I mean, that's what we used for all the cereal rye last fall. And it all grew really well. Would it have grown better if we no-tilled it in with a no-till drill? Maybe, and I'm thinking about doing that this fall just to see. But it did pretty well. It certainly did well enough. So even a big farmer who's got 1,000 acres could say they wanted to take 50 or 100 acres, and they could go and buy an old 8300 grain drill and hook it up to a small tractor and plant cover crops. It's not that hard. It's really not that hard. It does take a little bit of conviction and a little bit of, it's mostly wanting to do it, honestly. The biggest part of it is just wanting to do it and setting your mind to wanting to make it work. And there is a certain amount of risk, and certainly when farmers aren't making a lot of profit each year because the commodities markets are volatile and every year is a gamble and the weather's iffy all the time. And so, like, I can see not wanting to take a big leap into new practices, but doing it on a small scale, not tough at all. Now, I mean, maybe you got to work for it a little bit. Not everyone wants to bucket, you know, bushel baskets of dry fertilizer into an old corn planter, but it can be done, you know. It's work, but it can be done. I just wanted to talk a little bit about people who make excuses for why doing a regenerative agriculture practice, switching to some no-till and some cover crops, even on a portion of their land, why that won't work. And I think it'll work in just about every soil type too. I mean, some people say it won't work for their soils. We have heavy clay, except for the 18-acre field. That's actually a pretty decent soil composition out there. It's a lot of black ground, and there's a couple of high spots that are a little bit more clayey, but most of it's pretty rich. But we have several fields like the one I just finished. It's a lot of clay, and somebody told me not that long ago, well, you know, I'd like to do it, but too much clay in our area, it won't work. It works, it's fine. Anyway, all that to say, I'm done for the day. I'm gonna get a drink of water here. Gonna head in, maybe have a cold beer, and then it's home for the night and back tomorrow morning. So we'll see you all then. All right, it's day 2, hot and sunny. Good day to get a tan. Too bad I've already got one. Let's get to it. All right, I'm trucking right along here. Planter's doing a good job of putting the fertilizer where I want it. Pretty precise job of getting it right next to the corn rows. The only thing I forgot to mention before that didn't work the way we wanted is this unit should have been shifted to the other side of the corn row, but the transmission for the fertilizer system is right there in the way. So we had to I just moved it a little bit further the other direction so it wouldn't be running too close to the corn. And so they're a little bit, there's one oddball in there basically. They all had been running to the outsides relative to the center of the planter, and I switched those two over there to the insides and this one to the inside, but that one had to stay. So, but I don't think it's going to make any difference. It's getting the fertilizer next to the corn, that's all that matters. Well, I'm just about wrapped up here. I'm on my last load of fertilizer. I've only got a few rows left to go before I'm at the woods over there. So I will either finish up or be a little short, but I don't think I'm going to be short. I think I'll be right on. We had to adjust the rate a couple of times. We started out with a high rate on the first field I did because we knew that that was not quite as fertile as this field. Then we dropped down to our intended rate for this field. We had some fertilizer left over from corn planting, so we wanted to use that up too, hence the higher rate. Anyway, we got to this field, got it about 3/4 done, realized we were going to have some fertilizer left over, so then we bumped the rate back up again. So it ended up being pretty well calculated, or guessed at anyway, because we're going to run out right about the time we're supposed to be done. So, can't ask for anything better than that. All right. right, it's a little after 6 p.m. It's supper time, and I'm done with the field, but I've got a little bit of fertilizer left in the 2 boxes. I think you can even see the shadow of it there, just a little in the bottom of each one. So this is the end of the field I started on. It's also the longest side of the field, so I am just going to have supper, come out, run 1 or 2 passes or whatever it takes to empty those bins out, and then we're done. You know, I'm gonna miss the fertilizer buggy. John Deere 7000 makes a pretty good fertilizer delivery system. Okay, the planter's unhooked up in its spot up by the yard by the row units, and I am about played out here. That was a lot of buckets of fertilizer to lift into that planter for the second time. But before I head home, one last thing. This is our cover crop seed for interseeding all that corn ground. If you can believe it now that I just went over all of it with that side dress fertilizer, now tomorrow I'm going to pull up the 8300 grain drill. We're going to remove the row units that would run over the corn rows and get that thing set up for interseeding. Then we got to calibrate it for this seed, for the pounds per acre rate that we're going to put on. And then I get to go over all that corn ground one more time. It's almost an identical process because you're covering 4 rows with that grain drill when you're doing interseeding. So I'll be taking the exact same path I just took through all the corn ground. But before I go home for tonight, there's a slight chance of rain, really slight, almost non-existent, but I don't want this seed to get rained on, so I'm going to take it out of the truck here, throw it in the granary, and then I'm calling it a night. So we'll pick it up tomorrow with the interseeding process.